One of the interests I have on the channel, and obviously in my life, is martial arts and self-defense. For that reason, I'm going to, maybe against my better judgment, go ahead and make a video about the recent Jordan Neely death. This is a highly publicized incident that happened in the New York subway, where a disturbed young man was unfortunately killed by this young man, Daniel Penny, former Marine who was on the subway car where Jordan Neely was ranting and raving. Jordan Neely was talking about how he was willing to take a bullet, I would kill a mother effer, I don't care, I'll go to jail, things like that. Now, he didn't attack anybody on the subway, he didn't pull out a weapon, and he didn't, I guess, verbally directly threaten anybody, but regardless, it was enough for Daniel Penny, who was behind him, and dragged him down to the ground to put him in a chokehold. Neely resisted, went on for a few minutes, and that proved to be fatal. So I want to talk about this. It's going to be a short video, and not in the way that I think maybe a lot of people would expect. No, I don't want to get into the political aspects. It's turned into quite the political football with people taking sides based on their natural political orientation. Not getting into any of that. As someone who thinks about self-defense and whatnot, well, one, I think this is a horrible tragedy. I feel really sorry for this young man here. I feel really sorry for anyone who is mentally ill, and it seems he clearly was. But regardless, there's this old saying in self-defense, martial arts circles, all that. It's better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6. In other words, it's better to act in your own defense and then have to face the law than to not act in your own defense and be killed, right? The 12 refers to a jury and the 6 to pallbearers. And that certainly applies to this case here. Now, this one is a tough call. In my opinion, if a ranting person on a subway car or, somewhere like that starts to pull out a weapon or even reaches into their pocket after saying those kinds of things, do I think someone is justified in taking them down? Absolutely. But he didn't do that. However, does it seem reasonable to feel threatened in that situation? When someone's ranting about how they don't care and they'll take a bullet and they'll go to jail and, murder, well, obviously. But might nothing have happened if no one had, physically interfered with Neely? Well, maybe, but it's hard to say, especially when you're in the moment. I remember an incident from not that many years ago where on Mother's Day, we're eating in downtown Dallas at an outdoor table. And poor, and I mean, in all senses, just this poor homeless guy, mentally disturbed, kind of spots us and locks in on us and starts screaming and walking towards us. Well, I stood up and I put my hand in my pocket where I had a knife, my right hand, while with my left hand I kind of waved at him in kind of a placating gesture. One, so I could kind of mollify him. I was trying to be just gentle with my gesture from a distance. But two, the left hand was to distract him so he wouldn't notice my right hand sneaking into my pocket. And mentally, as you can imagine, I was preparing myself to have to stab him if he got, too close. But, and I thought I handled that pretty well. I didn't get aggressive. I didn't yell back at him or anything like that. I calmly told my son to move over to the other little mini table where my wife and daughter were, and then I stood up and put myself between him and them and all that business. But in retrospect, I kind of realized it was just stupid what I did. Luckily, the guy turned around and walked away. And by the way, he was the one jacked homeless guy, too, on the street. He really was. What I should have done is just gotten my family and gone inside. The door to the restaurant was right there. And this is the danger of martial arts. I love martial arts, obviously, if you see my channel, but that I've talked about before in previous videos. And, whatever training you have, maybe it's mediocre training, maybe it's great training, whatever, but whatever it is, or maybe you have a gun on you, whatever, does not make you a superhero. And you should look to avoid conflict if at all possible. But as you can imagine, I had this protective instinct kick in. I mean, I was there with my family, but I let that trick me into thinking that, combat was the only way to protect us. And my personal opinion anyway, it's my video, this protective instinct is, I think, what motivated the Marine in the story. We live in a country with mass shootings all the time. I would definitely be worried that something was about to happen, that lives were about to be lost, including my own, and he was probably looking to defend himself, just, kind of cut the situation off, protect himself and everybody else. But once you cross that line, once you decide it's better to be judged by 12 than possibly carried by 6, anything can happen, as it did here. I think the death was accidental, but it happened, and now this guy is looking at possibly facing 15 years in prison. And this is the flip side, the duality of martial arts training, or say weapons carry, that the story has made me think about a lot here recently. So, one, yeah, it's not a superpower. You might get your ass kicked. You might get stabbed to death, whatever. What if in my story, thank God this didn't happen, what if the guy hadn't stopped and just came right up to us and I had used the knife? Well, then I could find myself in a ton of legal hot water. But on top of that, what if one of his buddies that saw what happened and was walking up from behind and had a knife on him? He could have killed me. But back to the other side of the coin, the duality, the other thing is your training is, of course, dangerous. Assuming it's good training at all, then it is, like the chokehold applied here. And there are pictures of it everywhere. I'm not including it in my video because that feels like a grisly exploitation to do that. So, but anyway, speaking of that picture, I've seen it, and anybody who knows martial arts would look at it and say, okay, I don't think that guy was trying to do maximum damage. He really was just trying to restrain the disturbed person. But even doing it in that way, that's my interpretation, but even doing it in that way still resulted in a death. So, no easy answers. There's no litmus test here. It's kind of like the sports saying that the only two mistakes you can make are abandoning your game plan too late or too soon. When it comes to, taking active self-defense measures, too late could be deadly for you, of course, but taking it too soon, meaning unnecessarily or too preemptively, if you will, could put your life in danger as well. Kind of ironic, but yeah, that could end up costing you your life. Or, as in this story here, costing someone theirs. And speaking of lives, Daniel Penny's has been turned completely upside down at the moment. The story is sad but instructive for martial artists. It reminds us to watch out for the instinct to act when that might not be necessary, especially when our ego creeps in. Oh, I can handle this. It also reminds us of the danger of the skills and that once things get physical, anything can happen. It might not go the way you think it's going to. Anyway, those are my thoughts. The story obviously reminded me of an incident from my own life and some more, but that's the only one I'm going to mention. And I think when it comes to self-defense, you're going to have to trust yourself and make a choice if, God forbid, you end up in an situation like this young man here did. But once you do, the consequences are going to be whatever they're going to be. Whether you choose to err on the side of caution or precaution. Thanks.